Alright, what's up? This is Figure. First I'm going to go over Boujou. I'm going to teach you how to do some match moving. And then I'm going to export the camera solve into Cinema 4D, and then we're going to create some text there. And then finally composite in After Effects. So let's just get started. So we have After Effects open. We're just going to take one of my cinematics from Finale. So if you watched it, then you're probably familiar with this cinematic, but we're just gonna use it. So new composition, 1280 by 720, 30 frames per second. Let's make it 5 seconds. Just drag the clip in there. And as you can see, this is a grenade cinematic. So okay, so yeah, that's the cinematic right there. I'm actually gonna render out as a PNG sequence because Boujou it can import AVI files, but Boujou will make a much more better track by reading each PNG. So let's first composition, add to render queue, format PNG sequence, and then we're gonna put it somewhere. Actually, for the sake of this tutorial, we actually already pre-rendered everything, so we'd actually have to do that. So once you're finished exporting that, you're gonna go to Boujou and then import the sequence. Okay, so just apply that, and then we have to tell Boujou now the correct frame rate. So set up edit camera, frame rate is set to 30. And if you ever don't know your frame rate of your clip, you can actually just go to After Effects and it'll tell you on your project manager. So once everything's loaded up, all I have to do is just hit track features and then press start. And depending on your computer, it should take a minute around that. Alright, so it's finished now. After that, all I have to do is hit camera solve, press start, and it should take a couple seconds. Okay, so what you have now is Boujou has given you these little track points on the cinematics, so they're looking good so far. Now, if you're exporting into 3ds Max, you're gonna have to add some edit scene geometry. Quickly, I'll just go over that. You know, if you just go over one of your track points. It'll turn green, and then you go to 3D tasks, add edit scene geometry, and then add coordinate from hint, and then you simply just connect to selected and then change your type. So for example, this would be the x-axis, or yeah, and then this one would be the z-axis. So since we're exporting to Cinema 4D, we actually don't need to do any of that. So we'll just keep this tutorial nice and simple. After that, after the camera solve, you will just select some track points. So we're going to use this one, and this one also looks pretty good too. So we're just going to grab 3 track points and then hold control while clicking them, and then right click on one of them, flag for export. And after that, export camera solve. And depending on which program you're using, for example, After Effects, it'd be considered a Maya file. So Cinema 4D, C4D, export flag tracks only, and then hit save. Okay, so you just gotta import that in there. Press OK. So now we have what Cinema 4D is. We have the camera, and then we have these 3 track points that we previously flagged in Boujou. So it looks correct. It's looking good. So now, first things first, we're actually gonna add the background for it. So if we go to Object, Scene, Background, and then on the materials here, New Material, double click on the material, and on the color, I don't know, the color thing here, you're just gonna hit the texture, and then you're actually gonna import your sequence. So I believe it was called tutorial, this one. So just import that in there, press no, And then right after you import that, you're actually just going to hit this picture here and then click on the animation tab, press calculate, and then it should be correct. If it isn't, you can just change the frame rate of it, and then you simply just drag the material to the background. So now the track points will be moving with the background and it will be animated. So that's pretty much it. So now we're just going to add some text in here. MoGraph text object. Let's call it lesson. And highlight the text object, and then functions transfer, and we're going to use this track point. Okay, so now it's automatically tracked into that track point. Let's just scale it down a bit and make this a bit more bolded, and horizontal spacing. Let's move that a little bit. Okay, so I think about Cinema 4D is you actually may have to manually rotate it yourself, but that's not really a big issue here. So I'm just going to rotate it just a bit, and now it looks like it is correctly tracked. So that's pretty much it. So now for lighting setup, we're just going to use Grayscale Gorilla's Light Kit Pro, and in the Light Kit Pro there will be a ring light, and this is usually what I do for my text. So you just double click on that and it will automatically give you a ring light. So if you go back to the content browser, there's actually some default materials that we can use. So on the, just hit Cinema 4D materials and then the Dano, I believe it's pronounced that, and then you just hit the glossy and drag that to the text object. So now we're just gonna render it out. And when you're rendering out, it's important that you make the format as a PNG and enable the alpha channel. As well as, if you can, if you want to, you can also include some ambient occlusion and some global illumination. This is just simply some reflections, kind of similar to V-Ray. If you ever used 3ds Max, these are the samples. So if you want a quick render, you can just simply turn those down. But for the sake of the lesson, we're just gonna leave them as default. So I'm gonna let this render, and actually, before you render, make sure you hide the background, so it's just the text. You do that by clicking the traffic lights here. So I'm just gonna be right back, and I'm gonna edit this out and just render it. Okay, so we're just gonna import the PNG sequence from Cinema. So File, Import, File. Locate the text here. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So now it should be automatically tracked, and it's looking good. Well, it's not looking the greatest, but we're certainly going to change that. So definitely add some color correction to it. Let's just add some blur because it's a bit too sharp. So we're just going to add some color correction to the text. So we just simply desaturated it, so there's really no color to it. It's really up to you. Just experiment with the coloring of the text, and as well as the material of it. So if you want to change the color of the material, you can always just double click on the material and then mess around with the specular levels, etc. So we have a text. I'm actually just going to add some shadow to it. So I like to add my shadows in After Effects, so I just duplicate it. Duplicate the layer and then generate a fill to it, so it's just pure black, and then add some more blur to that, and then I'll put it underneath it, and then I'll make it 3D, and then just lower the opacity of it. So yeah, that's it's looking some pretty good shadows. The thing about it is now it's actually going to track as well, because we simply just duplicated it. So yeah, it's not looking bad now. We have shadows, and it's definitely looking more realistic. So The next part of the tutorial is we're going to actually color correct it all. So let's just pre-comp this, the shadow and the text. Just call it text. Okay, so we're going to have to actually add some aftershake to it. Well, first we should actually add some particles. So if you're ever wondering what I do with my particles, I'll show you the settings right now. Go to Simulation, CC Particle World. Take off the floor. Birth rate is set to, I believe it's set to 0.5. Some along the lines of that. Set long activity is 3. Radius is 1. Y is 1, and then Z is 2. Physics is set to fractal. Actually, you can really use any physics, but I prefer using fractal omni. Velocity is set to 0.2. Gravity is set to 0.1, negative 0.1 rather, and then particle type is set to phasosphere. Birth size 0.2, as well as the death size. And birth color as well as the death color is both set to white. So as you can see, there will now be some particles there. Okay, put it beneath it. So there's a bit too many particles, so I'm just gonna lower it. So yeah, we now have some particles to it. Okay. And now we're just gonna add some aftershake to it. Actually, let's add some optical flares to it first. So, Video Copilot optical flares. You can also use null light factory. It really doesn't matter. I prefer optical flares. So if you just go to the options, I like using the lens object glow, and if you actually just set the blending mode to add. Okay, so now we have some glow. We're going to change the scaling up to 200 or even larger, but it doesn't matter, and then put it on top of the text. So let's all just pre-comp this, highlight all of them, and then pre-comp. So what I like to do is for my color correcting is I like to make it the pre-comp a 3D layer, layer new, light. Just create a spotlight for it. Now I'm just gonna create like a soft vignette. Kind of if you compare it, actually, definitely kind of notice the difference. Just gives it more of a cinematic feel. That's just me though. And for usually for my color correcting, I will go to color correction, go to curves, and I'll just create a little contrast here. Create some tint. Set the amount to 14. And then add another curves. And just mess around with the values here. So we're at the red value, we're just going to increase some highlights, and we're actually just going to lower just like that. Okay. So it's definitely looking a lot more better atmosphere to it. So I'm actually going to add some letterboxing to it. What I like to do is I like to just create 2 solids simply, and just, you know, make kind of thin rectangles, doesn't really matter what size, and then duplicate it and then put it on the other side. Okay, so now we're going to add some aftershake to it. So if we just go to the FX preset and then type in aftershake, you can actually get the aftershake from the Video Copilot website. It's free. So my settings, you can just download it and set it to your put it in your After Effects plugins folder. So my settings for aftershake are speed is 1, amount is set to 15, and then rotation is set to 7. You might need to scale it, the pre-comp, just a bit, you know, because you might see some sides. It might repeat the sides just a little bit. Okay, so we're pretty much done here. Alright. Peace.